Okay, let's unpack this incredible story. And it doesn't start with a famous king or some grand temple, but with a secret that was hidden for thousands of years and found completely by accident.
Exactly. We had to go back about 150 years. You have the Rusul brothers, local guys, scouring the limestone cliffs at Thebes, looking for tombs.
And what they found wasn't just another tomb, was it?
Not at all. They stumbled on a hidden shaft cut deep into the rock. I mean, it was a sheer drop of about 20 meters, 6 straight down.
Wow.
And that was just the end. From there, it opened into this huge network of tunnels, maybe 100 meters long, with all these little side chambers carved out.
And inside this labyrinth, they find what we now call the royal cache, DB320. And this isn't just a few pots and bits of gold.
It is the single greatest discovery of royal mummies ever. Over 50 of them. Pharaohs, queens, all undisturbed.
Just imagine being the first official down that shaft. You're pulling out names from history books.
Literally. I mean, Ramesses the Great said cases. These are the giants of the new kingdom. It was like pulling legends out of the sand.
And the very existence of this cache tells a story, doesn't it? That these kings were moved here centuries later.
Right. It was an act of preservation. Loyal priests, in much more dangerous times, were trying to protect their great ancestors from tomb robbers.
So it's a desperate measure to save their history, but tucked in there among all these titans was a much earlier, far less famous pharaoh.
Seqenenre Taa II, and his presence there is the first big question.
Why him? Why was he considered important enough to be saved alongside Ram?
The Egyptians who moved him clearly saw him as part of that same great line of king. And that's our mission for this deep dive, to figure out why. What did this obscure king do, and what can his very strange, very damaged mummy tell us about his life and death?
The first clue we get is right there on his coffin, Seqenenre the Brave.
And that's a loaded term, the brave. It begs the question, what did he do to earn it? He didn't build vast temples like the others.
No, and the mummy inside and it's a brutal.
It is utterly unique. When they opened that coffin, they found something no one had ever seen before. He's the only pharaoh ever discovered with such massive, violent wounds. His face is just distorted. It's a record of an incredibly violent end.
The moment you see him, you know that title wasn't about monuments, it was about sacrifice. And that kind of evidence, it demands a modern scientific look.
Which brings us to forensic, and specifically to the work of a world-renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Richard Shepard. He treated this 3,000-year-old king like a modern-day crime victim.
And he focused right in on the skull.
Yes, and what he found was just horrific. It suggests a flurry of absolutely murderous.
So what are we talking about here? What were the main injuries?
There were 2 overwhelming wounds, both on the right side of his head. The first is where a piece of his skull was hammered in, smashed directly into his brain. It left this huge crater-like dent.
And the second?
The second is right next to it. It looks like the outer part of the skull was almost pried off, maybe as the weapon was pulled out. It also punched deep into the skull.
So either one of those would have been enough to kill him.
Instantly. The early anatomist who saw him a century ago, Elliot Smith, he said the same thing. Either wound was lethal, both together. It was a guaranteed violent death by axe blows.
Okay, so that tells us how he died. But it really opens up the questions of where and why. The original theory from 100 years ago was pretty straightforward, right?
It was. Elliot Smith concluded he died heroic from axe wounds he got in battle.
But that narrative, the hero king on the battlefield, it starts to fall apart closer.
It really does. For a start, why is a pharaoh, a living god, on the front line of an axe fight? It just doesn't make sense. Kings direct the battle from the rear.
Right, you don't risk the entire kingdom by putting the divine ruler in the middle of a melee.
Exactly. And then there's the evidence from the body itself, from the mummification process, or I should say the lack of it.
What do you mean?
Well, an Egyptologist, Dr. Campbell Price, pointed out that the preservation is terrible. For a pharaoh, mummification was a sacred 70-day ritual.
70 days? That's a huge undertaking. Very specific step.
Meticulous steps. You'd remove the brain, the organs, and then cover the body in natron salt for weeks to completely dry it out. The body would be perfectly straightened, composed for eternity.
And it was Seqenenre?
Almost none of that happened. His
Yeah.
body it's contorted. His arms and legs aren't straight. His face isn't composed. It's like he was left in the position he died in.
And crucially, the brain wasn't removed.
The brain is still there. And he wasn't properly treated with natron. It points to one thing, a rushed, incomplete embalming, done under very difficult circumstances.
Which, for a long time, people assumed meant he was mummified on a battlefield far from home.
That was the logical conclusion. But it's a huge breach of protocol. And this rush job, this moment of crisis frozen in time, it connects directly to what we know about his reign.
Which is not a lot.
Very little. A broken doorway, a few stones, nothing like the monuments of Ramesses. It tells us he probably didn't reign for very long.
So a short reign, a violent death, and a rushed burial. It all points to a specific and pretty terrifying period in Egyptian history.
The Second Intermediate Period, a time when Egypt was broken and the north was ruled by foreign invaders, the Hyksos.
So when Seqenenre came to the throne, the glory days were long gone.
Distant memory. He ruled a kingdom that was just a fraction of its former size. Egypt was being squeezed.
And the main threat, the existential threat, was from the Hyksos in the north.
Yes, they had their capital, Avars, right in the fertile Nile Delta.
Yeah.
And from there, they controlled everything.
What did controlling the delta actually mean for Seqenenre?
It meant he was being slowly strengthened. The delta is the engine of Egypt, where the food is grown, but more importantly, it's the gateway to the Mediterranean. It controls all the trade routes.
So the Hyksos had a stranglehold on the economy.
A total stranglehold. They cut off Seqenenre from resources, from wealth, from imported goods. They were starving his kingdom.
And if that wasn't bad enough, the Hyksos also had a massive military advantage. They brought new technology to fight.
A complete technological mismatch. The Hyksos introduced the horse-drawn chariot. The Egyptians, they just didn't have it at this point.
And a chariot on a battlefield against...
Think about the shock and all. The Egyptian army was mostly foot soldiers, spearmen, archers, and suddenly you have these fast mobile platforms crashing into your lines, outflanking you. It's terrifying.
And their weapons were better too, right? The famous composite bow.
Absolutely crucial. The Egyptian bow was simple, just a piece of wood. It worked, but it had limited range and power. The Hyksos composite bow was an engineering marvel.
How so? What was it made of?
It was laminated. Layers of wood, animal horn-like buffalo horn and sinew, all glued together under tension. When you draw that bow, it stores way more energy.
So the arrows fly further and hit harder.
Much harder. They could punch through Egyptian armor that their own bows couldn't touch. You're an Egyptian soldier. You're being outranged and outpowered.
They were outmatched in every way.
And that forced a realization. The Egyptians had to change. They had to become a more militaristic society just to survive. So Seqenenre had this stark choice.
Yeah.
Live as a vassal king or risk everything in an all-out war.
And the evidence suggests he chose to fight.
He chose defiance. We see it in the Archaeology at a site called Dar el-Balas. They found a door frame there with his name on it.
And this was the site of his palace. But it wasn't just any palace.
No, it was built like a fortress.
Yeah.
An imposing military fortress. This is not the work of a king who's trying to keep his head down. This was a statement.
What did it look like? I mean, what kind of statement was it making?
It was designed to intimidate. Massive walls, 2 stories high, covered in this bright white plaster. It would have been this gleaming vision in the desert. And it was built to last.
Using high-quality materials, even when the kingdom was struggling.
Exactly. The best quality mud brick, the best craftsmen. It was a massive investment, prioritizing military readiness above everything else.
And it wasn't just the one palace, was it?
No. There was a whole settlement and a second southern palace built up on a hill.
Why there?
Strategy. From that hill, he had a commanding view of the Nile. More importantly, a commanding view north toward his enemies. The whole setup screamed military buildup. We're talking hundreds, maybe thousands.
So from the very start of his reign, he had war on his mind.
Undeniable. You can just picture him standing on those white walls, staring north, planning the move that would define his entire reign.
But what was the trigger? What was the thing that finally kicked it all off?
For that, we have this amazing 3,000-year-old papyrus. It details the quarrel between Seqenenre and the Hyksos king, Apophis.
And the reason for the quarrel is bizarre.
It is truly strange. Apophis, who's hundreds of miles away in Avarice, sends a message complaining that the hippos in a pool in Thebes are too loud and are keeping him awake at night.
That makes no sense. You can't hear hippos from that far away. This has to be a translation, right?
Almost certainly. It's a classic case of how tricky ancient languages can be. The Egyptian word for hippo sounds very, very similar to the word for soldier, or maybe cavalry.
Ah, okay. That changes everything. If he's demanding Seqenenre get rid of his soldiers.
Exactly. Given that Seqenenre is building this massive fortress and amassing troops, it suddenly makes perfect sense. It's a demand to demilitarize.
So whatever the complaint was actually about, Seqenenre refused, and he launched the war.
Yes, the evidence points to him making the first move, which brings us back to why. Why risk it all when you're outmatched?
It comes down to his role as pharaoh.
It's his divine duty. You see it in temple carvings, like at Medinet Habu. There's this image of 2 gods tying together the plants of Upper and Lower Egypt, the lotus of the papyrus.
Symbolizing the unity of the two.
Which is the pharaoh's central job. To keep the 2 lands united. With the Hyksos controlling the north, Seqenenre was failing in his most sacred duty. He wasn't a true pharaoh of a united.
So he really had no choice. He had to confront them, or his entire reign was a failure.
He had to step into that moment. He started mobilizing his army, using that big fleet on the Nile to move his troops north from Dar el-Balas, right to the Hyksos border.
So he goes to war, and the original story is that he dies on the battle, but we have to question that, right? The way pharaohs are shown in battle scenes isn't exact reality.
No, it's propaganda. You see the king twice the size of his enemies, holding them by the hair, about to smite them. It's designed to show the guys that he's all-powerful and in control.
You can't show the king being weak or indecisive.
Never. And we know it's not literal because when you look at the mummies of other great warrior kings, like Thutmose III, they don't have battle. Seqenenre is the exception.
And the forensic evidence from his own body seems to argue against a battle.
It does. Let's go back to that first report from 1912 by Elliot Smith. He himself noted something that's hugely important. There were no injuries to the arms or any other part of the body.
Meaning he didn't fight back?
He offered no resist. In a battle, you'd instinctively raise your arms to protect your head. We call them defensive.
And you'd expect to see them on the forearm.
On the ulna, the outer bone of the forearm, yes. Or on the hands from gripping a weapon. He has none of that. The fact that all the wounds are on his head suggests he was completely immobilized. He was nowhere near a battle line.
And there's another piece of evidence or lack of evidence that's important.
Yes, the lack of animal predation mark. No signs of vultures or other scavengers.
Which means he wasn't left lying on a battlefield for any length of time.
Not even for a few hours. He was killed and his body was recovered almost instantly.
Okay, so if he wasn't killed fighting on the front line, what happened? This is where the theories really diverge.
They do. Let's start with Theory A, ceremonial execution. This idea, put forward by scholars like Dr. Gary Shaw, suggests he was captured after losing a battle.
And then executed publicly.
Right, to make a show of it. The wounds themselves support this. The angle suggests he was kneeling and bound, with an attacker standing over him.
Unable to resist. And the weapon. This is where it gets really detailed. They used more than one weapon.
At least 3 different types. Which is fascinating. The analysis points to a Hyksos-style battle axe with its flared blade, then an Egyptian-style axe, and finally something like a spear or a dagger.
So this wasn't a quick death. It was a prolonged, ritualized mutilation.
That's the theory. A blow from the Hyksos axe to the face, maybe another. Then maybe they turn the axe around and use the butt end to crush his eye socket.
And then they bring in an Egyptian weapon.
Possibly. A collaborator, an Egyptian vassal, might have been forced to deliver a blow with an Egyptian axe. That long gash on his forehead. It's a powerful symbol of betrayal.
And then the final blow to the neck. It's a brutal but clear picture, but it's not the only one. This brings us to theory from Dr. Shepard.
And this is where modern forensics just completely flips the script. Dr. Shepard was not convinced it was a single event, and the reason is healing.
Healing. On the bones.
On the bone. When he looked closely at some of the facial injuries, he saw signs of bone regeneration. The bone was starting to knit back together.
And that doesn't happen in a few minutes. That takes
weeks.
Yeah.
And even months.
Yeah.
This means Seqenenre had 2 sets of old ones to his face that were healing, and then the fresh, fatal ones to his head.
How could something that significant be missed for 100?
People were focused on the cause of death, on the big, fatal blow. Dr. Shepard, as a pathologist, was trained to look for a history of trauma. He went back to the old x-rays from 1912.
And what did they show?
Damn it. Right at the base of the skull, at a place called the foramen magnum.
Which is what exactly?
It's the hole where the brain stem connects to the spinal. It's the main cable, basically, that controls your entire body.
So an injury there would be
catastrophic. The damage looks like it was from that narrow spear or dagger wound to his neck. An injury right there would sever the nerves. It wouldn't necessarily kill you instantly, but it would cause immediate paralysis from the neck down.
So he would be alive, maybe conscious, but completely unable.
Exactly. And there's more evidence for this. His hands.
What about his hands?
They show what are called contractures. When you have long-term nerve damage, the stronger muscles pull the hand into a fixed, claw-like position. It's clear evidence of paralysis that lasted for a long time before he died.
This is a completely different story.
It's a chilling scenario. Seqenenre survives the initial attack, the one that gave him the facial wounds and the paralyzing neck stab.
Yeah.
He's taken back home, and he lies in his bed for weeks, maybe months, completely immobile.
A pharaoh, a living god, trapped in his own body, the political crisis that would cause.
A disaster. A leader, unable to lead the war he started. And while he's lying there, helpless, his killer comes. He can't even raise his hands to defend himself.
And that's when the final, fatal axe blows were delivered, while he was lying in bed.
It completely opens up the question of who killed him. Was it a Hyksos assassin who snuck into the palace? Or was it an inside job, a rival? A general, someone who saw a paralyzed king as a liability that needed to be removed.
Wow. We go from a heroic death in battle to a cold-blooded assassination in his own bed. The mummy really is the only reliable witness we have.
And it shows how forensics can just rewrite history. We move beyond the propaganda and uncover this incredibly tragic human story.
So, no matter how he died, in battle, executed, or assassinated, his decision to fight the Hyksos.
Absolutely. He's so underestimated. He didn't finish the war himself, but he was the catalyst. He set the stage for his sons to come in and finish the job.
And they did. Within 60 years, the Hyksos were driven out and Egypt was reunited.
Without his initial defiance, that war of liberation might never have happened. He provided the motivation, the the spark. He's the foundational figure for the entire new kingdom.
All those famous names, Thutmose III, Tutankhamun, Ramesses II, they all owe their unified kingdom.
He paid the ultimate price, but he started the fight that let Egypt be Egypt again for another 1,000 years.
When you look at those wounds, at the evidence of what he went through, you realize he more than earned that title.
He was, without a doubt, Seqenenre the Brave.
So when you pull it all together, what's the most startling thing this deep dive reveals?
For me, it's just how fragile our historical narratives are. We had this story of a hero king dying in battle, and forensics completely shatters it. It replaces it with this much more complex and tragic story of paralysis and assassination. The body itself becomes the real text, and it tells a story of suffering that redefines a pivotal moment in history. It just proves that the dead can still speak if you know how to listen.
This leaves us with a final thought to mull. What if Seqenenre hadn't? What if he just tried to manage? Would the new, with all its power to might? What